We judge ourselves too often, too harshly, and too unfairly. We seek societal approval and validation and acceptance because we have rejected ourselves. And we think the societal acceptance can make up for that. Nothing can make up for your own self-acceptance. We distract ourselves. Okay, let me call to my best buddy and he will say, oh, everything is okay, everything's fine, don't worry about it. Or start, okay, let me just check my Instagram feed or let me watch some movie. And those are all distraction. Instead, when you're feeling unpleasant, just sit with it and think, why am I feeling bad? We want to be belonged. We need validation from others, right? And to earn that validation, we want to please others. To please others, we wear masks that we think may please them, and we forget our real identity as we keep pretending to be someone else. The need for validation and earning approval of others, that leads us to a path which takes us far from our authentic self.
Today, I'm excited to have Vikas Agarwal, who is the author of Waiting to Breathe, A Journey Toward Authentic Living, and a tech executive on the show today. Before we jump in, I want to tell you a little bit about Vikas in his own words. Vikas was born in India, a curious and imaginative child. He spent his childhood moving across the North Indian countryside. Like most middle-class Indian kids of his time, he chose engineering as a career to get a shot at living a middle-class life. Despite loving theoretical computer science, physics remained his first love. After graduation, Vikas moved to Redmond, Washington to work for Microsoft and subsequently at Amazon. An avowed atheist and materialist, he started questioning his entire belief system after learning about the double slit experiment and its implications. His understanding and realization of reality and divinity has evolved since then. He took a break from his tech career to write a book titled Waiting to Breathe, A Journey Toward Authentic Living, based on his learnings from his life. His current motto in his life is, human birth is earned with great difficulty and is ephemeral. Make use of it and create things of beauty. Thank you for joining us today, Vikas. We're super excited to hear about your journey. One of the things I like to ask before we dive in is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you feel like yourself today?
I would say about 7.5 to 8. It depends on the kind of sleep I had previous night. And so I had a decent sleep last night. So my mood, my sort of energy level depends on the amount of sleep I had the previous night.
To get this going, I wanted to talk a little bit about your book you just published. I think it's super relevant to what we're talking about here on the show about living authentically. I had the pleasure of reading it when I was on the Star Trek cruise recently, and it really touched me in terms of not just the philosophical depth, and I actually really liked how you didn't just tell, but you showed, right? And also kind of exploration for the universal search for meaning and self-discovery through adversity. Authenticity was kind of a central theme in the book, and then I know you and I were talking about that as well. Yeah. And for the audience, what's really interesting is that conversation about your book and why you wrote it is one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, right? Which is, I think, really cool. I'm curious for you though, what motivated you to write this book?
So writing has been sort of an outlet for me. Whenever I'm down, whenever I'm not feeling great, I write. So I started writing on LinkedIn about, I would say, 8 years ago. And then I was working at a team in Amazon. Let's just say I wasn't having great time there. And I was seeing a lot of dysfunctions in the organization. So I started writing a series of sort of articles, which were part of a bigger story, where I identify why, different teams and organizations struggle. And over the next 2 years, I finished that in 18 parts. And I got a lot of comments on those stories that, hey, Vikas, you should convert it in the book. And at the back of my mind, I always had this thought that I will write the book someday. And then, you keep postponing things to someday, and then someday never arrives. Or someday could be today. So I decided that someday is going to be that day. And I just started writing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no time like the present to get started, right?
Yeah.
Um,
There were two incidents, which were also big sort of catalyst towards it. One of them is a Buddhist poem. I have put that poem at the beginning of the book, and basically it ends with, human life is earned with great difficulty and it is very short. So make use of it every day and night. And the second one was I was listening to a chanting video and I saw this lady just transform the whole room of stiff upper lip English people into sort of whirling dervish. And then it dawned on me is that I think our purpose is to use the skills and the gift that we've been given in the service of others. So those were the two sort of like catalysts which sort of provided, the last push for me to write the book.
yeah, you talk about, how it's our purpose to use our skills for others, and that motivated you to write the book, and it was based on some of the struggles that you faced in your work, and I think that came through in the book as well.
So those struggles were basically nothing. I mean, if I look back, um, I have matured quite a bit since then. Those struggles don't seem, much of an issue now. Uh, to me, it seems that I was immature, that I was bothered by those issues. Um, I think part of the thing is that it is a basic human need to belong. And once you feel like an outsider, um, it's a very unpleasant feeling, especially for someone like me. My father was in, a job that required him to move a lot. So my entire childhood, I just felt like an outsider wherever I went. And the only sort of um, the anchor of my life was my family. And so whenever I feel like an outsider and not belonged, I felt unpleasant. One would think I would have gotten used to it, but um, I don't think, yeah, you get used to it. Um, so that was sort of the motivation for me to write those articles 8 years ago. But the book motivation was primarily just my aspiration of writing book because I decided that, you know, I have crossed more than half of my life and it doesn't make any sense for me to keep postponing what I have always wanted to do.
It's one of those things where we only have so much time, and we keep saying tomorrow we'll get it done, and it never happens. But the thing that you had mentioned about belonging, um, and how that was so important to you, and that kind of led to a lot of your struggles. What is your perspective on why belonging was so important to you?
I think it is one of the basic human needs, even if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, right? Physiological needs and psychological needs. So feeling belonged is a core psychological need for humans. And if you see communities where, there are stronger bonds, even if those communities have less material resources, they're happier, right? Take Bhutan, for example. It's a country which is very far behind in terms of technical advances, but it is the happiest country in the world. On the other hand, you could look at pre-advanced cities like San Francisco or Seattle. People live like, an island. A lot of people are from outside of the city, living their lives. And, uh, you know, with our current technological advances and the distance that we've been getting in human relations, I think, um, the well-being of thriving of humans is really suffering in the big cities.
Belonging is very much an important part of the hierarchy of needs. And I think because it's so important to us, I think it has an impact on authenticity. Do you see that in your
Yes,
experience?
definitely. We want to be belonged. We need validation from others, right? And to earn that validation, we want to please others. To please others, we wear masks that we think may please them, and we forget our real identity as we keep pretending to be someone else. So, the need for validation and earning approval of others, that leads us to a path which takes us far from our authentic self.
How did that affect your path specifically? The book chronicles the story of the protagonist struggling with that, but I'm curious, like, what was your path there?
Yes. And so, if I may take a little detour here, you know, Friedrich Nietzsche, he was a German philosopher, and I reference him in the book when he talks about, he who has a why can handle anyhow. He talks about three metamorphoses. Humans are born, sort of like children. Children, they have a way of, children are authentic. They're born authentic. And as we grow, we develop, what we call the ego, right? And which takes us farther and farther from our authentic self. And then humans, sort of they become camel, where they are the productive member of society. Society makes demands of them, and they fulfill those demands. And as the burden on camel keeps increasing, one day camel just overturns all the burden on itself and says no, and then transforms into a lion, right? And lion does whatever lion wants to do. And then eventually lion transforms into child again. Child can interact with the world openly and with curiosity, without the risk of or the fear of getting hurt. So I look at every person has to go through sort of like these three transformations.
Mhm.
For me, I turn into camel and then lion. And then, as part of writing the book, I'm on the journey to become sort of like a child again. I would say, coming to the US was a big change for me, a very foreign country. Everything was different. So, as it was for our protagonist, Ari Nazrani, to blend in, he becomes quote unquote American, right? He changes his name from Aryan to Ari. He pretends he doesn't know his mother tongue, and he hides his origin. He quote unquote whitewashes himself. So I went through many similar transformations, where, I would put on masks to blend in with people, you know. And as you gain perspective and maturity, you realize that, it's just too much burdensome to carry on all that sort of weight of your fake ego. And then you try to sort of get rid of it.
Yeah, there's something to that metaphor. By the way, I had just stumbled across that in a post that you had written recently. It starts out child, and then let me see if I get it right. Child, camel, lion, back to child. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I think there's something about you had mentioned, like, the camel gets tired of carrying the load and then becomes the lion. Or the camel gets tired of carrying the load, becomes the lion, right? And then at some point,
Yes.
the lion goes back to child again. And by the way, what you said about children being authentic, right? We start out authentic, right? And then there's things that take that away. But the camel, it's kind of like that metaphor of, there's a point that something breaks the camel's back, right?
Yes.
Was there a
And
moment
Alex,
like that for you?
for us was leaving Amazon.
Right. Yeah. Well, something caused us to do that, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's something there about like having that moment, because I think some people don't have that moment, right? Some people just stuck in the camel that never gets broken.
We get addicted to our suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and that suffering becomes our identity, right? In fact, in one of the chapters, the chapter is called If You Want to Live. There's a character called Brian Maroney, and he starts the AI group at his company before anybody saw AI coming, and he becomes the head of AI. He is the expert on AI in the company. And then he gets reorged into a different part of the company, and he has a new manager, and the manager wants to bring his own people, and they remove Brian from his position, even though Brian was sort of not happy, was suffering, his health was suffering, his relationship was suffering, but he didn't quit or he didn't make any changes. And suddenly, one fine day, his position is gone and there's a new person occupying that position. And then he realized that his identity is shattered because his identity was head of AI. And he lost his family, he lost his health because of that. And then he doesn't find any will to live.
Story about, Brian, come from your own personal experience?
Yes. So I met this person, unexpectedly. His name is not Brian. His name is somebody else. And
Yeah.
this person was telling me this story, and they were very dejected. And we had, quite a few talks, and I tried to help them get perspective. They're pretty happy now, by the way. And they realized that such setbacks, even though were painful at that time, really gave them perspective on life. Because if you don't want to quit the addiction will quit you, right?
Mhm.
So it was sort of like an intervention in that sense to get perspective on life, that your position is not you. And, it helped them get perspective. So their situation turned out to be, way more sort of happy ending than Brian Maroney's.
Yeah, that's great. It kind of reminds me of one of the pillars of this show, and especially in terms of authenticity, is rejection, right? We need rejection in order to grow and to find where we belong, right?
That's right. Yeah. In the book, Aryan goes, he gets a lot of rejections, right?
Mhm.
I mean, in fact, if you think about it, he became an orphan at an early age, and he had to leave his country. So in a way, it was a rejection from his own country.
Mhm.
He comes here as a foreigner to a small town. He's rejected by everybody in his, sort of class in his school, except, a girl that he meets and he marries. And then even at work, he faces a lot of rejections. And those rejections really force him to introspect. Is something wrong with me? Right? Because we are our worst judges. We judge ourselves too often, too harshly, and too unfairly. So he goes on this sort of like inner journey to see, why am I feeling bad because of rejection? And then he really realizes that it's not the society that has rejected him. It is he himself who has rejected him. And if he can learn to accept himself, if he can learn to love himself, he doesn't really need societal approval, right? We seek societal approval and validation and acceptance because we have rejected ourselves. And we think the societal acceptance can make up for that. Nothing can make up for your own self-acceptance.
That's awesome. I actually heard a saying. I'm curious if this resonates with you recently, but and I think it actually is something I even highlighted in your book, that you had talked about. If we don't love ourselves, we naturally seek it externally in relationships, friendships, in validation. That was in your book. And I also heard recently, one of my favorite sayings is, if we can't get it internally, we look for it externally.
That's right.
Why do you think that is? That's something that's so obvious, so simple, and so transformative, gets kind of overlooked in our society.
Yeah. I mean, I would go back to the three metamorphoses, right? Lion accepts himself, in a way. Lion is on the path to accepting himself or herself, right? When you're camel, why do you listen to others? Why do you carry the burden? Some of that is duty, but some of that is unnecessary. We carry the burden of people's expectations, sometimes unreasonable. So um, we do it because, it's the second, you know, uh, stage in Maslow's hierarchy, psychological safety, because in approval, we seek safety. I mean, if you remember from the book, the second last chapter, homecoming,
Mm.
which had actually multiple meanings. Homecoming, because our protagonist, Aryan, he goes to Iraq, to his hometown where the chemical attack had happened. So there's a homecoming there that he actually visits his home. But there's a deeper meaning of that. Homecoming is home is inside us, right?
Mhm.
If we can get in touch with our inner self, right? That's homecoming.
Yeah.
There's a writer, I think his name is Howard Kabat-Zinn. He has a book. The title is Wherever You Are, There You Are. Like, you can be wherever you are if you know, can look inside, right? If you can feel at home in your skin, in your heart.
Yeah.
So, there are multiple books about it. If you remember, there was a book by Paulo Coelho, um, The Alchemist. So there's this Andalusian boy. He goes all over the world to find the treasure, but in fact, the treasure was under his own tree. There's a book, Acres of Diamond, where this person had acres of diamond within his house. Those are sort of metaphorical in a way that the true home lies within your heart. And we don't realize it. So we seek it everywhere.
That's really powerful. I mean, you probably knew that before for a long time. I'm assuming that wherever you go, there you are. I think we've all heard that saying, right?
Yeah.
Um, was there a moment when that finally started to take hold and it had visceral meaning? Because I think for me, it was like one of these things right here. You got to love yourself, where you are, that's where you are. But like, it doesn't matter until it really sinks
Yeah.
in.
So over the period of sort of my 23 years of career, a lot of people who are suffering have confided in me. And work has been my primary sort of mean of social interaction because I don't have family here. I don't have sort of friends here. All the friends that I made here are through work. I came here alone without sort of basically nothing, just, a couple of briefcases. And, every time I talked to these people and we did sort of like a 5 why or postmortem of why they were feeling bad, the answer comes out that we feel we are worthless,
Mm.
right? Every time I felt bad, I did a postmortem on that. Why am I feeling bad? And the next why and the next why. And the answer always comes back is that we don't value ourselves, right? And we abuse ourselves so much, we consume alcohol, nicotine, cigarette, uh, you know, bad food, bad sleep. If somebody we really cared about was doing all that, we would do everything in our power to stop them from doing it, right? But we don't stop ourselves because we don't usually value ourselves that much. So we have all these negative emotions. So whenever I have a negative emotion, I do that. And what I realized that every time I have negative feeling, when I postmortem it, just that I have rejected myself, right? And then once you know it enough times, you realize that, you have to accept yourself as you are. And then a lot of these negative feelings will go away. I cannot sort of identify a particular moment where the flip happened. Maybe it was gradual, but that change happened. And, a lot of negative feelings of resentment, jealousy, anger, they vanish. The other thing I would say is, Joe Dispenza talks about it a lot, is the feeling of love, right? Being in love. When you are in love, you know, It's like everything around you is perfect. You hear, angels playing music. And most of us experience that love through romantic connections, right? Or maybe when you have children, right? But it is possible to feel that kind of love for the world, right? And in that case, because romantic love will, over a period of time, diminish, and you get back to your normal, unsatisfactory consciousness level. But if you have started loving yourself, you are able to love everybody and everything in the world as yourself. And then you can live with gratitude, with a feeling of love, and life just becomes easy.
Part of the reason I asked that question is because I think it's so beautiful when people find that moment when they can finally start loving themselves. It just fills me with so much joy and warmth and happiness. It's like, I think it's the most amazing thing that can happen to somebody is to
Yeah.
hit that moment. It's more beautiful than finding a life partner or having a child, because it's so much more challenging, I think. And
Yeah.
to your point, it enables them to now become like this conduit of love,
Yeah.
and it enables them to feel peace. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of times people are looking for happiness, but maybe they're really just looking for that inner peace.
Yeah. And a lot of this suffering we go through happens through societal programming. You
Mm.
know, our parents, they project a lot of their insecurities on us. We project our insecurities on our children, right? Then you go to school, you have certain indoctrination going on over there, and you have these teachers who try to model your behavior. And then you have peers and your friends that have impact on your behavior. So, we just keep listening to others so that we stop listening to our own inner voice. And again, it goes back to the camel. Like, people keep loading the camel up with their expectation, with their model of behaviors. And in the camel, it's just buried under all that load until it flips it over and says no.
Yeah, or to your point, it gets so used to the suffering, doesn't.
Or you get to so used to suffering and they just sit under the load.
And there's a virtue in suffering, I think. I guess like I'm curious, like, why people, you know, stick with that suffering for so long.
So I have, suffering is a very complex word in that sense, right? Um, Suffering, what is suffering? Like, I think Buddha basically says life is suffering, right?
Mm.
Um, and suffering, basically, we either want some things to change or we want something to not change. But
Mm.
life is constant change. So there'll be constant suffering in life, right? Um, you may look at somebody and say they have a perfect life, but they're suffering. Take Robin Williams, for example. The guy made everybody laugh, but he was deeply suffering inside and he committed suicide. There are pleasant times, we feel pleasant, we chase pleasures. Those are moments which are ephemeral, but most of the time, there's always some sort of dissatisfaction we have life. If the dissatisfaction level is sort of mild, we just put up with it.
Yeah.
When it becomes deep, maybe loss of a loved one or loss of your job or some health issue, then it sort of puts a stop to your normal routine and it forces you to take a stock in the situation, to look inside, that is this all to life? Like, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? So those are the moments that can force us to really evaluate our lives. The second kind of suffering, sort of like normal, everyday dissatisfaction, we get used to it. We think that is the natural state of being. It is not. So if somebody is going through that sort of, mediocre, medium, you know, amount of suffering, you should welcome these disruptive moments. They may feel very unpleasant when that happen, but they will put you out of the funk of daily dissatisfaction.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to an interesting point, which is maybe it's when we are busy playing it safe that we stay in that hum of mild suffering. And it's only when we play to win, when we take big risks, we risk big suffering. And
That's right.
maybe there's something there. Not only is there value in playing to win, and maybe you could win, but there's also value in maybe you could put an end to some degree of suffering that you can struggle with, and maybe you could put an end to some degree of suffering.
I mean, if you remember from the book, our protagonist, Ari, there's a portrayal of this character that he is going through mild suffering every day. But he thinks this is part of life until a disruptive event happens in his life when he meets his uncle, and uncle has this, health issue. He's not going to be around for long. That really forces him to look at everything he's done. And then he's presented with a situation at work which he finds unethical. And he has two choices, basically, either to quit and not do unethical stuff or do the unethical stuff, right? Both of these ways are sort of easy way out, cowardly way out. When he talks to his uncle and he gets bigger perspective on life, he recognizes what is his duty, what actually he should do. He takes a much bigger risk to himself and he goes ahead with it. And he saves a lot of people in that process. So, if you're honest with yourself, if you are in tune with your inner self, you don't feel fear taking big risks.
Yeah, because I think you trust yourself, right? That if things go wrong, that you'll be there for yourself. That's that self-compassion, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Why is it so hard for us to be compassionate for ourselves? Like why? And I think, I posted on LinkedIn recently about this where like, Amazon is a place with really high standards and, people go there who are high achievers to feel themselves.
Yeah.
It seems to be a common theme, not just at Amazon, but in society in general, where people feel like if they're not feeling bad about themselves, they're worried
not growing.
Yeah. What do you think about that and why that is, how people get out of that?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, majority of the people at Amazon, they're overachievers, right? And the sort of places they have been in the past, they were the best. And they get all this validation. They build this identity. I am the best, right? I have to perform the best. I have to be number one, right? And when you put a bunch of such people in an environment which also enforces this ranking system, right? That makes them insecure, right? I love Amazon. I love Amazon. I loved my time there. But one of the things that I found to be particularly toxic is the performance curve, is that you have to force fit people in that curve.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of suffering for people. I mean, I don't think, the HR department or people realize how much toxic and sort of destructive that is for people's morale and the long-term well-being of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, and I love Amazon too. And I think when you love something, you kind of want to provide it with healthy criticism, right? And I think something we learned from Amazon is that if you see a problem, highlighting it is a way to get it fixed. But to your point, Yeah, I think when you create this artificial system where you create scarcity,
Yeah.
artificial scarcity, people stop collaborating, right? And
Yes.
they start to compete for that resource. Um, and
You turn your organization into a zero sum game instead of positive sum game.
right, the whole point of growing a business is to get away from the zero sum mindset and
Yeah,
towards let's create a bigger pot.
that's right.
And do you think that that scarcity mindset is it's kind of like a microcosm, right? Maybe Amazon is a little bit of a microcosm for society at large, because I think there is a lot of that scarcity mindset that drives people to way.
Yeah, I agree. And here's the thing, right? Like when your heart is open, um, when you accept yourself, when you start loving yourself, you naturally become, you know, abundant mindset. You naturally feel abundance because you don't need a lot of things or a lot of validation, or you don't need any external stimulus to feel good or feel happy, to feel complete. You're complete unto yourself, right? So from that point of view, you're naturally in abundant state, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and then when you're in that state of abundance, you see so much more possibility, you create more, you can innovate more, and um, I think
Yeah,
it's not just true from a business standpoint, but from your own personal, you can see more possibilities for your life.
that's right. So I've been thinking a lot about thermodynamics. I mean, as I mentioned, physics is my first
Yeah.
love. I've been very fascinated by the second law of thermodynamics, is that entropy of the world or of the universe is increasing. And we we are, humans, we are sort of like these, such a rare occurrence in the universe, right?
Mhm.
And we have this thinking capability. We can create things of beauty. So why not take advantage of that?
Yeah.
You know, if you are in the state of fear, you cannot sort of get your creative juices going, right? You have to be in the state of loving and accepting, and to be able to create something beautiful. Beauty doesn't come out of fear. Beauty always comes out of love. In India, there are three names of God: Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. You know, Satya is Satya Nadella, and Sundar is Google CEO. So Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Satya means truth. Shiva means God. Sundaram means beauty.
Mm.
They're all sort of synonymous of each other. Like truth, God, and beauty, they're synonymous with each other. And God is love. So you have to be in this openness state to be able to create beautiful things.
Yeah. So here comes the real conundrum, is that, if we're saying mm, so many people are operating from that place of scarcity, and, a large organization that's so successful like Amazon is operating from a place, how is it managing to do that in spite, or is it that there's more room for growth that's not tapped into because love isn't at play?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Amazon is clearly very successful. One could ask, why are they so successful if they're operating from scarcity mindset? I think I wouldn't say the fear and scarcity is the only motivator. I love Amazon leadership principles,
Hmm.
and they have ownership and customer obsession. Uh, so there's another aspect to it. Amazon does a really great job hiring great people, and those people are not always driven by just external factors.
Hmm.
A lot of these people are also driven by self mastery, and they're inherently motivated.
Yeah.
So the consciousness level of those people really um, makes them create things without expectation of reward, or without the expectation of outcome of it. So people create things for the sake of creating it. Um, Not everybody is sort of like living in a state of fear or scarcity mindset. They do a great job hiring great people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, having been there for as long as I did, I went back and forth between, you made me realize I kind of went back and forth between my love was creating and love to build, and I missed that. And the other thing is love of customers, customer obsession, that
Yeah.
desire to create something for the world. But it was always that tension, like you said, with fear that pull you away from your craft, right? Did you feel
Yeah.
that too? And what were the things that you loved? Was it building and customers, or was it something else?
I love building things. So before I answer that, I'll just say one thing. It's about sort of like backward law, or Tao Te Ching, you call it Wu Wei. It was true in majority of the cases, and it's pretty true, especially when you are an individual contributor, engineer, not manager. You don't have to play a lot of politics. Is when you don't care about the outcome, like when you don't care about your promotion, when you don't care too much about your reading, you're able to do great work for the sake of doing great work.
Mhm.
And in turns, rewards came, right? And when you care too much about getting promoted or um, getting great rating, you did not do your best work because you were at the place of fear. So I did notice that quite a bit of, in my life, in my time at Amazon, that people who were driven by great outcomes did better work and were better rewarded. So when I was an engineer, I was driven primarily by just, doing great work, like, you know, writing beautiful code, reducing the entropy of the system, reducing the amount of bugs, reducing the code complexity. When I became manager, I was primarily driven by serving my people. What does that mean? That means is ensuring that these people have an environment where they can do their best work without the fear of punishment or expectation or greed for reward. They are able to master their craft. So that's what drove me to create an environment, to create culture where people could work like that. And it was hugely satisfying to me. Not just that, at that time, our team achieved great results. In every team that I led, we achieved great results. And there's nothing special, I'm a great leader or whatever. It's not because of that. It's just that I did not put a lot of controls and mechanisms on people to prevent them from doing their best work. I just let them do their best work. And the secondary payoff is that most of those people that have worked with me in my organizations, they're still in touch with me. You know, if I were hiring, a lot of those people would want to, apply, would want to work again because we had a great time working together. So it was hugely rewarding and satisfying to me to work like that at Amazon.
Yeah, you made me realize that that probably was the biggest driver to fight against the entropy of fear was the love of the people we serve as leaders, right? And also that we serve as you know we serve as leaders. We also serve other leaders. We serve our customers, right? And
Yeah.
that love can overcome that entropy of scarcity.
Yeah. I mean, if you remember in the book, there's a chapter called, so it's about a hypothetical company called Nile, which also has leadership principles. The first one is boundless,
Not
boundless
any way
ambition.
related at all to yeah.
No,
No.
it's just Nile,
Yeah.
a river of Egypt. It talks about is that to turn the organization around, we need something even more powerful than empathy. We need love, you know? So it's sort of like a taboo word. You can't say love, HR would back down upon you if you say,
Yeah.
I love or I love you. You would never say I love you to one of your direct reports,
Yeah.
right? Because HR will crack down upon you. But really, you have to practice love, right? If
Mhm.
if you want,
Yeah.
people to do their best work, they should feel not just belong, they should feel loved there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that drove me to Snap. Was one of their top values was kindness, right? Which was really refreshing to me to see, company and code, something close to love, but quite. But I think you're right that like we need as leaders to be bold enough to say, no, it's actually love. And I think we need more of that in the
Yeah.
workplace.
If you say that in any, corporate setting, you would hear from HR. And the sequel I'm working, I mean, I feel that, I don't want to, take a dig at HR, but I think HR was supposed to be one of the most noble profession, but it has become, I think their job is very hard. They have to do things which they know in their heart are wrong, but they still have to do it. They've kind of become like enforcer of the company. Um, and in the book, we talk about it. The HR manager, Shanti Patil, she is talking to our protagonist. She just doesn't listen to him. She just has to enforce. She just has to carry out the execution. So, you know, um, uh, and a lot of that is driven from the fear of getting sued uh, in America, because we are a very sort of sue happy society. So companies really need to protect themselves from lawsuits. And that's why there are a lot of policies which really limit human existence. Companies would say, bring your true self to work, bring your whole self to work. You know, we are humans. We are complex beings. We have bright side, but we also have very dark side. God forbid, we shouldn't bring our whole self to work. People would get fired the first day if they brought their whole self to work. Um, so I think from corporate point of view, being authentic is not have this discrepancy, not have this saying one thing and doing another. You know, from that point of view, I think Netflix has a good culture that say, we're not family, we're a team, and let's work like a team. That's at least authentic, right? On the other hand,
Mhm.
you have cultures, we're family, and then you fire them, because you want to save some money that quarter. You don't fire your family to save some money on quarter or save one quarterly earnings.
Yeah, you actually brought up a couple of really good points there, which is one is that, we I think sometimes we feel this pressure to show up authentically, but we it doesn't make sense to bring your full self to every situation, right? There has to be some thoughtfulness about what is authentic for you in that situation, right? And then I think the other one is that um, sometimes, to appreciate authenticity, you have to be able to accept and appreciate things that you may not like, that may not be the reality that you want, right? And I think that's probably the hardest part of, I think, authenticity is acceptance. Uh,
There's a great book from Michael Singer. It's called Living Untethered. Uh,
mm,
Basically, you know, I'll give an example. Seattle, it rains a lot. I would go out and it's
mm,
raining and I would complain, why is it raining? Why does it have to always rain? I can't walk out. And now I go out on a walk, starts raining. I love it. The rain is rain. It's just my perspective that has changed about rain. Rain is going to rain when rain is going to rain, right? Universe is unfolding as it should. And here we are in our little heads thinking that universe should unfold differently to suit our needs. That's a very entitled position. And once you recognize that, this moment is exactly how it should have been, then you can surrender to that moment. And then the true acceptance comes.
that is so beautiful. And I think it's also one of the reasons why people who build to innovate, entrepreneurial, like yourself, myself, this is so hard, right? Because we want to to bend the universe to our will. That's how we innovate. That's how we build things. But I think what you're trying to say is like you need to first accept it as it is before you can start to think about how you might do.
99.999% of enterprising endeavor will, result in failure, right? And if we get dejected after every failure, how would we carry on? Each failure leads you towards the path of success. It's part of the process. And if you think about it, everything in the universe already exists. We're not creator in that sense. I'll give you an example. I don't say I am the author of the book because I didn't write this book. If you think about the law of information, the information in the universe is constant. It cannot be created or destroyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we look at that, then the book that I supposedly written, it was already there. It was already written, right? What I've done is that I've just taken the bits and pieces of information and brought it together, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no information is created or deleted. Similarly, when iPhone was created, it already existed in that sense because no information is created or destroyed, just rearranged a little bit. And that rearranging requires some energy. So having a perspective on that we are not the doer. Like whenever the concept of I comes, right? The ego comes that I am the doer. I think that can get us in trouble, at least in my experience.
Well, I think there's something really awesome about that idea that it's kind of like ideas are discovered, not created, right? And there was this saying that I know early in my career that resonated with me, which is that when an idea's time has come, it'll appear in more than one place. And oftentimes the people say, oh, this person copied that person. It's like, there's this obsession in our society of like who originates an idea. And I think to your point, if you are so fixated on trying to create an idea and not open to discovering it, you're probably less likely to be there at the spearheading of a discovery, a new innovation.
That goes directly to what Tao Te Ching talks about. My favorite book on leadership is Tao Te Ching. The concept is Wu Wei. Wu Wei means doing without forcing. And when you force yourself that I have to get an idea, I have to, like your creative juices won't flow. Ideas come through inspiration. Inspirations come through openness. That's why the societies which are more open, they are more creative. Societies which are more sort of closed and conservative, they don't innovate as much. Societies which are chaotic, open, they create new things. And that you live in California. That's why California is the most innovative place in the whole world. It's very open. It's very chaotic.
Yeah, and I think that openness requires some courage, right? I think that's one of the reasons why that can be hard.
Vulnerability, like you have to be comfortable being vulnerable about, putting yourself out there, accepting rejections. Imagine a startup founder getting so many rejections from VCs or from hiring people, getting mentors. There's a lot of rejection one has to go through. I was listening to this, interesting anecdote that why is that Mormons such great entrepreneurs? Because they get a lot of practice of rejection because they go door to door to preach their religion. They get a lot of rejection. I thought that was very interesting, is that getting the practice of accepting rejections early in your life.
Yeah, I think it's a practice of it. It's also like you could go down two paths, right? You could go down the path where you were talking earlier. You become comfortable with the suffering of rejection, or you could go down the path, welcome the rejection, love it, you crave it because it's getting you to where you need to go.
The book talks about it in detail, is that what we end up doing when we're feeling unpleasant is we distract ourselves. okay, let me call to my best buddy and he will say, oh, everything is okay. Everything is fine. Don't worry about it. Or, start, okay, let me just check my Instagram feed or let
Yeah.
me watch some movie. And those are all distraction. Instead, when you're feeling unpleasant, just sit with it and think, why am I feeling bad?
Hmm.
You know, and if you sit with it, you will realize there's some childish reason that, you know, is giving you this unpleasant feeling or something that you have control over. You don't need to distract yourself, but you can control your own emotions because you sat with it, you experienced it.
Hmm.
And if you keep doing that with that practice, a lot of peace will come, a lot of acceptance will come.
That's like so powerful. And I think one of the things, it reminded me that one of the things that I struggled with so much, and I don't think this was just Amazon, I think this was just having a tech career, was that I really started to believe that I was a thinking machine that happened to feel, and that feelings are something bad that especially like in a tech company,
Yeah.
we tend to, we want to make our decisions very data driven, very objectively. And so, what happens when we realize that, well, wait, there's an emotional component. And by the way, I think every decision has an emotional, you never have 100% information. And so there was this moment where I had to realize, oh, wait, emotions are, what drive me as a human being. And so that relationship shifted. And that point in your, like, resonated with me for a reason.
That's what emotion mean. Emotions, motion, right? They move us.
Ah, that's a good one.
And the second thing, even if you look at stock trading, it's all a game of emotions.
Mhm.
Who would have bought Meta at $93? A lot of people were fearful.
Yeah.
If they had bought Meta at $93, it's like over $500 now.
Yeah.
So
I
it's,
mean,
it's,
it's that leap of faith, right? It's that,
yeah, when others are greedy, be fearful. When others are, it's just controlling your emotions. Not controlling, I would say, is recognizing your emotions and
mm,
don't let them take irrational actions.
there you go. And I think it's like not being controlled by them, right?
Not
Um,
not be driven by them.
yeah. And same thing, you don't want to be driven by information or externalities, right? You want all of that to
Yeah.
be information that you use to then decide what to do next, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, um, I faced this situation many times. You are running a large organization. There are people who are underperforming, and it is your fiscal responsibility to sort of create a separation with those people.
Mm.
But how you go about doing it is what matters. You can do it in a way that does right by those people, or you take emotions completely out of it, and then you take a decision um, which can be catastrophic for them. So I think there is aspect of compassion and feelings with every decision, which has to be coupled. Um, it's like yin and yang. You have information, knowledge, and you have emotion. Because even the book talks about it. The one of the leadership principles is empathy. It
Mm.
says that people will forget what you did for them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Right. So definitely, I think emotion is a big part in decision making. And if you're told that, hey, take emotions completely out of it, I think, I mean, Steve Jobs didn't didn't invent all those things with just data. When he was coming up with uh, iPod, people may have made fun of him. When he came up with iPhone, you remember what Steve Ballmer had to say about that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, I mean, even Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, he called out that there's a greater than 50%, I think greater than 70% chance that it was going to fail, right? So how is that a logical, decision to take? Well, he felt strongly that it was important enough, he cared enough that he would do it, right?
yeah, I mean, that's true with most of the, not just with starting at Amazon, but starting a lot of businesses within Amazon. They had a
Oh
huge
yeah.
chance, but what Basil used to call planting the seeds.
I remember one of those seeds working on those. You might have remembered the interesting finds.
Yeah.
I remember being in reviews with S team, and their main question was, like, does the team passionate about it? Do they care? That was because, there were so many unknowns. Like, would this be successful? We don't know, but like, if the team cares enough and they have, resilience and desire. But I think the other part too that resonated with in your book on this subject was you talked about like the scrolling and endlessly, avoiding your emotions, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
so relevant in this day and age where I feel like every day it becomes easier to distract yourself from yourself,
Yeah.
from your emotions.
So a couple of things. First, I want to just make a comment on, are you passionate about it? If the team working on something is not passionate about it, if they haven't drunk the Kool-Aid, it's not going to be successful. It's going to fail.
Mm.
And many times I've been in reviews with various businesses and various teams, and I have observed team members. You could tell that whether people feel passionate about it or not, and you can tell, okay, this is going to be a failure, right? I think this is one of the most important factors of product success is whether people are passionate about it, whether people will, because you can only be passionate about something where you see value in. If I am working on something that I myself will not use, I will not work there because that's going to be failure. And I had example of that. I was in Alexa shopping. I left that in like 6 months and I worked there and I said, okay, this is stupid. This is not going to work. And I would never use it. And I left. And that's how everybody there felt. A lot of people pretended to have drunk the Kool-Aid because that's the currency for success, right? But people didn't, people didn't feel passionate about it. People didn't think that was the right product, and product, didn't really do much. The second part is the infinite scrolling. Yes, I mean, you know, I was having a chat with somebody over this, and they were telling me about their daily dissatisfaction. You go to work, you attend these meetings where you don't have anything to say or do. You just have to be there, right? And you can try to pay attention, but nobody's paying attention. It's a Zoom meeting. So you start browsing web to distract yourself. And somebody was telling me that they were in a meeting where every participant was doing that and nobody was basically contributing anything. So they concluded the meeting. It's a way for us to distract ourselves because we are running away. We're running away from unpleasantness, right? You have negative encounters with your peers, negative encounter with your manager or some of your reports. You accumulate those negative encounter as sort of like a debt or a burden, a camel type of burden. You come home with it, right? And that leaves a negative feeling, and you don't want to feel that negative feeling. So you just distract yourself with social media or TV or whatever. Instead, as we discussed earlier, you could sit with that feeling, and that meditation with that feeling will show you a path out of it. Maybe it is that you have to leave your job or you have to change your job, right? But unless you sit with that feeling, how would you know what your next action should be? And sometimes it could just be that I need this job to make money to feed my family. And I don't want to sit with this feeling because it might give me ideas which may lead me to a path that may prevent me from fulfilling my duties. There's a fear of that. But I think that's selling yourself short. Sit with that feeling instead of distracting yourself from all the negativity, and sit with it, and your direction will be clear to you. Your subconscious will tell you what direction you should take. I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't browse social media at all. You should, but do it deliberately. Do it while you're doing it, and know that you're doing it. What we end up doing is that we're doing it and we don't even know we're doing it.
It's a problem when we're doing it to avoid something, right?
Yeah.
And
There's another thing in the book, another incident in the book, when Aryan goes to meet his uncle and he's hungry because he hasn't eaten anything since morning, and he just starts gobbling up the food. And uncle says, eat slowly. You might be able to enjoy it. But he's not eating as much as he's hungry. He's eating because it's an escape from the negativeness or the negativity he encountered at work. So he's eating to escape his circumstances, not to mitigate his hunger. And another similar incident on food is when Uncle Masood is, fasting during Ramadan, and he breaks his fast and he starts sort of gobbling the dates because he's very hungry. And then he realizes that there's no reason for me to sort of stuff my mouth with all this food. I should enjoy what is in my mouth before I pick up the next bite. So, in fact, and he talks about it, we can practice the art of living in every action we do, right? Whether it's walking, breathing, talking, eating. But we don't, most of the people today eat while browsing their web, on their phone, right? How many times have you seen people just eating food?
Yeah. Not very often. I think one of the reasons why it's so hard though is because, like you said, we don't feel comfortable sitting with our emotions, and we don't feel comfortable sitting with ourselves because we don't have that connection.
We're running away
with
from
ourselves.
ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And building that relationship with yourself is going to give you the power to take back your time and to live in the moment. I think we often get told, yeah, be present, live in the moment, but we're not told what is needed to get there, right?
And also how,
how
be present. How?
Yeah. I think the thing also you were talking about before this scrolling in terms of like in meetings, people they start. I mean, I saw VPs, playing games on their phone in meetings that they were running, And in retrospect, I get it, that those meetings were either they were just not stimulating or they were just, unpleasant, the way that they were being run, or they're just uncomfortable. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's something missing here that might be a game changer. And again, I don't know if HR is in the way of it, but like, maybe there's something here where, if companies could start to dive into this issue and fix this, could that differentiate a company and make it more powerful?
Yeah. I think in smaller organization, it's possible. You need a person you need people with open hearts to be able to create that environment. And really, majority of us, we are living in simulation. We're living in matrix. I think the book talks about it when he eventually gets sort of a perspective. He says that it's like I was wearing a VR set and somebody lifted that VR set, right? But if you're talking about a huge organization like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, it's just not possible because these statistical, sort of occurrence of such people is very less. Majority of the people, through the societal conditioning, are basically driven by free greed and fear. But for smaller organization, I think it is possible. About meetings, though, one thing I think every organization should adopt is that every meeting has an expiration date. If you don't renew, the meeting will expire. I think Shopify did something like that.
How did it turn out?
We'll find out.
Yeah. But I think you're right though. Like what happens is these companies get so big that they develop their own ego. I remember on my when I was leaving Amazon, one thing that I kept hearing over and over again was like, that's not very Amazonian, which was shocking to me because to me, what's Amazonian is to never say it's not Amazonian. It's to say it's still day one. And unless you know better, and it was a place at the beginning, I felt was very open minded and like, let's figure this out. And we're open to new ways of doing things. But then as it grew, it's just like with the human being, it goes through those stages, right? Where it develops,
Yeah.
it's like it's in the camel stage.
Yeah. So very interesting anecdote is Amazon used to have a leadership principle called be vocally self-critical.
Yep.
And it was my favorite leadership principle. I joined Amazon in 2006. You probably joined in 1999.
Yep.
So you would remember, in early days of Amazon, we were like underdogs, we were underdogs. Like we have to work the hardest. We have to think that it's not enough. Like we've got to really up our game all the time.
Yeah.
And we're always sort of criticizing ourselves. We could have done better. But what I noticed that once we got rid of that leadership principle, is not just because of that, but we got a lot of people from outside as well, from, different cultures. That underdog, that the humility, the humbleness that we could be wrong, that started evaporating.
Yeah.
And in more and more meetings, I started hearing, we are Amazon. We could do this. We could do that. We are Amazon. It's like, as you mentioned, the organization will also start having ego. And I felt like Amazon developed that ego as if we're something powerful and prominent, and we could get our ways through force, right? So that's something I think Amazon should watch out for. And I would really hope Amazon brings back vocally self-critical leadership principle back. I think the company could use more humility and that underdog sort of feeling among people.
I think it might be possible with your metaphor of child to camel to lion to child again, right? It's possible.
Amazon is in a lion phase right now. It's not camel, it's lion phase.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I did have an interesting thought about the vocally self-critical, right? Which is, and I think I mentioned this, I might have in my article about self-compassion, and it's really hard to balance, right? Being like there's being harshly self-critical, and then there's being compassionate self-critical. It's an important distinction.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it self-critical though.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe self-critical is probably the right word. It's evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're evaluating, it's like, how would you evaluate your little brother performance in test, right? I think Jordan Peterson says it the best. You have to treat yourself as somebody you care about deeply, right? So how would you evaluate the work of somebody you care about deeply, right? So it's the same way. You have love for them and you look at what could they have done better and write it down and just see whether you're doing it better or not. You have to develop a system, obviously. Otherwise, how would you know that you're doing what you said you would do? But don't be driven by the emotions of anger and fear when you are evaluating your own performance. Do it with love. I think love is the answer for everything, if you really ask me.
No, I agree. It's funny because it does kind of remind me of the 60s kind of, hippie kind of thing. But, I think there was some truth to it when you really look at it. And I think, going back to Amazon, and this is also an example for anybody, I think it's an organization, a person, is that you're right. I think self-critical needs to be brought back, but I think love has to be a part of that. Otherwise, I think we'll just end in the same spot it's in.
My main motivation behind that, maybe you could rename that leadership principle, is being humble in that sense, that having the underdog mindset.
Yeah.
A lot of people come to Amazon, from outside, with a feeling that we're joining a very large corporation. And the sort of cultural integration, because the company is so large now, is not that immersive anymore as it was, when it was a smaller company. Um, but, having the humility and that underdog mindset is, that also leads to frugality. If you have underdog mindset and if you have humility and ownership, you would, treat resources with care, right? What I noticed more and more was people just building these empires and not really caring much about, you know, um, how to run a business effectively and frugally until, somebody up in chain who still thought like Amazonian and still thought like an underdog cracked down on the organization.
Yeah. So, I mean, taking it back to the individual, I think there's some tension with humility and self-compassion. I think a lot of us think, okay, that sort of humility sometimes becomes going to be hard on myself.
I think that's misunderstanding it.
Mm-hmm.
Humility is, I could be wrong,
And it's okay to be wrong.
It's okay to be wrong because,
Yeah.
if your batting average is 50%, that's a very good batting average, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're right 50% of the time, because you've got to make sure that you're right more about one-way door decisions. Like you want a higher batting average on one-way door decisions. And it's okay to have way lower batting average on two-way door decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to maintain that, you would do really well. I have a sort of like a theory about success of organizations. And I think the book also calls about it. They have this leadership principle called curiosity. Our revenues are proportional to our knowledge, and our knowledge is in proportion to our curiosity, right? And that's where the experiments and two-way door decisions come into play, because the more you experiment with things out of curiosity, the more knowledge you generate, right? 80%, 90% of your experiments will fail, but 10%, they can give you the huge boost that your company needs. So you can't, unless you have humility that I know 90% of them will fail and I'm okay accepting that, that requires humility to fail 90% of the time. That's pretty hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It takes resilience, self.
Yeah.
I want to say kudos to you for upgrading Amazon's Learn and Be Curious principle, because you actually managed to close the loop and tie it back to the business report.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed one, I have a lot of Easter eggs in the book. I will just talk about one Easter egg in the book. Okay. So actually, I'll talk a couple of them. The book is actually circular in a way. The prologue is actually chronologically happens at the end of the events of the book. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second is, in the whole book, the protagonist refers to himself as Ari. It's a character that he has made to blend in sort of Seattle crowd, right? But in the prologue, he calls himself Aryan. The general counsel, Laura, says, "Can I talk to Ari?" And he just replies, "Yes, this is Aryan." So if you think about it, this whole book is about unbecoming of Ari and becoming of Aryan.
Yeah.
And that's also sort of leads to the subtitle of the book, The Journey Towards Authentic Life.
I didn't pick up on that. I thought it was me being bad with names. So I was like, did I just misremember?
Yeah.
I think that's really
Hopefully,
clever.
book becomes very famous. People will have fan theories about it. Then a lot of these things will come out.
and then we'll debunk them right here. Love it.
Yeah.
Um, Awesome. I want to wrap us up. One thing I want to ask you, and by the way, thank you. This has been incredible. And as always, we always have such amazing conversations, and I'm so glad that we finally got to get one of them on the books. One question I like to ask before ending is, what's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self on your journey towards authenticity?
That's a tough one. My first instinct is to say nothing. Whatever mistakes I made, they had to be made to become what I am right now. The other part of me says that a lot of the things that you think matter, they don't. That's probably one advice. Don't care about others' opinions or live your life. That's what I would say. But I guess I had to go through all of that. It's the concept of amor fati from Friedrich Nietzsche. Is like, if you are at peace with yourself at this moment, right, then your life could not have unfolded in any other way for you to be who you are right now, right? So you wouldn't want to change anything in your life that led to this moment. So this is sort of like how I feel. So frankly, I don't really have any advice for my younger self. It's kind of unusual answer.
No, actually, one of my other interviews, very similar answer. I think it's valid. I think your advice would be that it's going to unfold the way that it should.
Yeah. Just enjoy the ride. You're on a spaceship. Okay. Earth is a spaceship.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the ride.
Absolutely is. If people want to connect with you, how could they find you?
I have, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's where I have, a major audience. I'm also on Twitter. It may not be easy to find. Maybe it will be easy to find me. I can send my handle, but primarily LinkedIn and Twitter is where people can find me.
We could share that when we publish the video. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Vikas Agarwal, author of Waiting to Breathe, A Journey Toward Authentic Living, and your host, Lex Rosa, on Transformational Journeys. And we'll see you next time.